Hi, it's Michael from DNA here, and in the next few minutes we're going to talk about how you can use a mind map to revise for any upcoming exams you might have. So we're going to cover using colour to make the map more visually interesting and memorable. We're going to think about images and a technique called dual coding, and we're also going to think about general revision practice, including using icons to mark off topics that you feel you've revised successfully. As always, don't worry if you're using a different software package to what you're going to see on my screen. I'm using Mindview on a Windows PC, but this video is about the strategy underpinning this process, and although I'll be making reference to specific functions in Mindview, I'll be giving you hints about how you can find similar tools in other software packages as we go along. So I've thrown a few ideas into a mind map here about allergic reactions, mainly because I wanted just a few drug names in my mind map, so we can think about the ways in which mind maps can help you to remember concepts or ideas or things that have unusual names. Now, when we start thinking about revising from a mind map, I think it's a good idea to play around with the color that we're using. So I've just selected all of these different elements under types of allergy. In fact, let's get the heading there as well, and I'm going to go up to format. And here we have an option to change all kinds of things. We can change the fill color in the branch there, so I could make these, not yellow, let's make them green. We can also change the branch shapes if we want to, so they're a slightly different shape. We've got all kinds of different options here. I think it's really important to try and make your map as visually distinctive as possible, especially if you're investigating this software in relation to something like dyslexia. Try to use color, because depending on the way that you color code parts of your map, it's going to help you to process the information it contains without having to read as much. It's going to help you retain that information, and it's going to help you to navigate around very large maps. Now, let's think about these antihistamine names that we have here. It's quite difficult to represent this kind of information with images, but it's a really good idea to try and get as many images into your map as possible. This uses a technique called dual coding, where we associate images with text, so it's really helpful if you find it difficult to remember things that you've read. Now, I could click on the branch picture button here in Mindview. Depending on the software package you're using, there might be a slightly different looking icon, but there's always ways to get images into your map. If I click on this, it's asking me to find an image on my computer, which will then insert into my map. However, you'll also find that most mind mapping packages will allow you to simply copy and paste images from the clipboard. So I'm going to choose one of these, and I'm going to play a little game with these drug names, because I'm not going to find a useful image to represent fexofenadine. So instead, I think that the beginning of this word sounds a little bit like fax, so I'm thinking of a fax machine there. And I'm going to jump over into Google Images, which I've got open in a separate browser window, and I've done a search for a fax machine. I'm going to choose this one here. I'm going to right click on this image, and I'm going to copy this image to the clipboard. Now I'm going to jump straight back into my mind map, right click and paste. This doesn't work in all mind mapping packages. In some packages you might need to go and click on an image insert icon, but in a number of packages you can just copy from the clipboard like this. Now, some of you might find this quite a strange way of working, especially if you're studying something quite complex like medicine or biomedical sciences. And by all means, if you've got a diagram which really helps you to remember a particular concept, put that into your map instead. But this is another way of encoding information that is really powerful, despite the fact it feels a little bit silly sometimes. For instance, another example, we've got this other drug name called loratadine. So if you've got a friend whose name is Laura and you associate a picture of her with a particular drug, you might be surprised just how effective this system can be. Again, this process is called dual coding, so you're using your creativity and your personality and your sense of humor to make links between images and complex language or concepts that it's difficult to represent using an image directly. Now we're going to do something else with images. If you haven't got this feature on your mind mapping program, don't worry, you can just use the basic functions for color coding things to mark them off, but I think it's important to mark things when you think that you've revised them correctly. Otherwise, you don't know what you don't know. So for instance, let's imagine we're revising all these subjects. You might have added in a text note. and you might have some notes about the drug that you're working on, loratadine. And then when you've finished adding your note, you can revise these and you can try and memorize the images and associate them with the text. Now, when you want to test yourself, you can use the little black circle or whatever that looks like in the package that you're using and click on that so it shrinks down that entire section, and then try and remember all of the things that you looked at. Now in Mindview you've actually got a tool where you can insert icons. So under Insert we have the Icons feature here. So let's say that I remembered loratadine correctly but I forgot all about cetirizine here. So I'm going to click on cetirizine, go to Icons, and I'm going to give that a sad face, whereas I'm going to give loratadine a happy face. You can use whatever icons you want. If you don't have icons on your mind mapping package, you could always use some kind of color coding system. So I could click on this. In Mindview, I'd go to Format and I'd change the fill color, for example, but that might look slightly different in the program that you're using. Either way, it's important to mark off what you got right and what you got wrong, so that when all of these you've got right, you can add an icon to the header here to show that you've revised that entire section correctly. So once you've started adding icons into this section, all you need to do is go back and look at the ones which you've given unhappy faces to, or you've marked with a color to denote that you've got them incorrect. And that way the amount that you need to revise with each pass over the map gets less and less, and you've got a much better indicator about how you're doing, how far you are through your revision process. So this is all complete now. I'm going to go into Insert, add a smiley face in there, and I can shut this part of the map down, and I know I've revised everything in here, and eventually as I work through my whole map and remember everything correctly, then everything should have a smiley face and you know that you've done your revision correctly.